A stack of papers, under the influence of human force, fell noisily onto the table, which was accompanied by a scream accusing the man of being worthless, and only pretending that he was working, since the project was a complete failure. Unceremoniously pointing a finger at his subordinate, the boss added that he would not be credited with any overtime work. Sam, with his head down, listened to the words of his boss that he was just the scum of society, and his worthless existence was not worth a cent. Continuing to cover his subordinate with selective curses, the boss suddenly took into his hand the glass ashtray standing on his desk. And a second later, this object, which acted as a throwing weapon, hit directly into the temporal part of the man's head. His legs gave way, and a second later Sam was already lying on the floor, where, amid the boss's shouts that he didn't need to pretend, but that he needed to get up and leave his office, the blood from his broken head slowly spread across the floor. Gradually losing consciousness, the man thought that he had lived a truly worthless life, where he found it positive that this life had come to an end. To the sound of an unknown voice that the binding to the system and revival had been successfully completed, Sam began to open his eyes, where he saw a male silhouette in front of him. His first thoughts were that death had passed him by, which meant he would need to make another report, where at the same time the young man opposite was shouting for him to get away. Raising his body on one arm and feeling his head with the other, Sam said that he would follow all the instructions of his boss. However, when he looked up, the young man was very surprised to see a handful of students standing in front of him instead of the boss. Recognizing one of the nearby young men as Hank O'Brien, with whom he had once studied long ago, Sam wondered if he was still unconscious, where his presence was not in the office, but on the sports field of the educational institution, defied any other explanation. Then, relaxing, Sam fell back onto the grass, arms spread wide, and thinking it was a dream, he remembered that it was because of Hank that he had been expelled from school, where, without a certificate, he was not hired for any normal job, as a result of which he had to agree to the first place that came his way, where they were ready to take him, where he whiled away his days receiving meager wages and constantly being under the yoke of the evil boss of this third-rate company. These unpleasant memories made Sam jump to his feet, where he immediately told the one because of whom his whole life was broken that Hank was nothing of himself, but could only rely on his parents' money. But before the young man had time to finish, Hank suddenly dealt him a powerful direct kick to the body. Kneeling down, the young man, convulsively gasping for air, noted that the pain from the blow was too real for sleep. Well, Hank, who was not indifferent to his opponent's statement, came closer and asked him to repeat what he had said again. However, Sam continued to think that it was all a dream, and therefore said that he remembered everything perfectly, where the story began with their classmate, whom Hank was harassing, but Sam prevented him, putting him in an awkward position. Hearing what was said, the young man unclenched his fingers, saying that now his opponent would definitely be in trouble. Other young people standing nearby, accompanying their leader, noted that this overly arrogant guy should have broken something. Sam, smiling bewilderedly, noted to himself that this was just a dream, and therefore nothing would happen to him. At this time, one of Hank's escorts asked him for permission to be the first to punish the impudent man, to which he agreed. Sam tried to remember what he had read that brought his subconscious to memories of his school years and, accordingly, to such a dream. But suddenly the guy who appeared in front of him, calling on some forces, tore his clothes with just the tension of the muscles of his body. After which Sam saw how the leg of this thug flew into the air and now quickly landed right on his head. The instinct of self-preservation did not fail him, where the young man was able to avoid the blow, literally jumping on the spot. And his unexpected opponent, noticing in which direction the young man should land, immediately continued the attack, raising his hand. Sam saw the thug's hand approaching him, and a voice suddenly announced the discovery of a deadly threat and the activation of protection. But realizing that he had no time left to dodge the blow, the young man closed his eyes, preparing to take this blow. But suddenly his opponent's hand seemed to simply rest against his body without causing any time, which caused corresponding reactions from both the one who struck and Sam, after which the young man, who believed in himself, showed his opponent an obscene gesture, saying that he had not eaten much porridge and he should have trained a little more before getting into a fight. Then the enraged fighter attacked his opponent, striking him multiple blows to various parts of the body. But the result of none of his attacks changed, and Sam responded by saying that now it was his turn to try. where with just one movement of his leg he struck the most vulnerable male spot, where a sharp and severe pain froze everything in his opponent, even the ability to make sounds. And the winner of this short fight, smiling joyfully, asked the rest who wanted to be next. Hank, calling the loser not the most flattering word, instructed his 2 henchmen to deal with the arrogant boy. Where are these 2, having become like their predecessor, also calling on certain forces, tearing their clothes, and they were accompanied by someone who had already tasted the power of Sam's blow. Looking at his opponents, the young man shouted that they were just dirty little people who were capable of nothing but intimidating and beating the weak. But before the system had time to announce a threat, protection from which was only 50% possible, the young man received a huge blow to the body, where he immediately felt how several of his ribs literally cracked from this blow. He himself was thrown back several meters by this shock wave. This was not a simple blow used by one of his new opponents, where in order to deliver it was necessary to develop and master the chi energy. Lying on the grass and exhausted from pain, Sam wondered why the attacks of the first enemy were harmless to him, and the last attack was almost fatal. And the system immediately explained that 100% protection will only be provided if the enemy's level of development is the same as that of the owner of the system. Whereupon hearing this, Sam was very upset, noting that even in a dream everything does not happen the way he wanted would. But then the system said that the owner was not in a dream, since his past body had long since died as a result of the injury he received. Where now the young man is back in his own body as it was during his school years, and at the corresponding time in his life. And while Sam was conducting these unheard negotiations, his opponents were coming closer, and suddenly a hail of blows rained down on the young man, where the system only had time to note how much damage was blocked, by 100 or 50%. With each blow he received, the young man felt that his strength was leaving him, and his consciousness was becoming less and less clear. Blood flowed down his broken head and into his eyes, and the system continued to report the degree of damage blocking. And finally, from his injuries and loss of blood, the young man lost consciousness and passed out. Sam's eyes began to slowly open, where he heard the dull voice of the system, which reported the restoration of his internal organs, brain, bones. And finally, feeling the strength in himself, the young man jumped up on the bed, thinking that this dream was somehow very long. Looking around, the young man noted that he was in a hospital ward. Then the young man paid attention to the state of his body, examining his arms, legs, body and feeling his head. Instantly, his memory flashed back to recent events in which a crowd of his classmates simply kicked him around on the football field. What created in him the understanding that these events could not end without consequences for his health. Jumping out of bed, Sam went to the mirror, where, looking at himself, he noted that he was not only alive, but also did not have a single scratch. To which the system immediately explained that at the moment the host's body has been completely restored, and if it is suddenly in mortal danger, the self-healing function will be triggered. After listening to the explanations, the young man noted that this was quite a useful function. Having turned to the system, the young man asked to provide him with more detailed information regarding his new capabilities and conditions of cooperation with the system, to which the system explained that he only wanted to present the control panel, which Sam immediately did, where after some time, which was spent on applying willpower, a certain screen began to appear in the air. And now the young man was already looking at the screen, which reflected all the significant information about the damage points received, the skills and level of the owner. Trying to understand the structure of the system, the young man noted that the protection is always active and accumulates damage points, where at the moment he has 27 such points, which means that he received exactly that many hits yesterday. Remembering what had already been announced by the system, the young man noted that if the enemy is equal, then he absorbs 100% of the damage, and if he is stronger, then the absorption drops to 50%. Therefore, if he fights with an equal opponent, then each blow adds only 1 point of damage to him, where all the damage received is absorbed, which means he will not feel pain. If the enemy is stronger, then each blow will bring 5 times more points, but the pain from the blow will also be felt. The system also provided a store in which accumulated damage points could be exchanged for useful skills and items. Thus, it turns out that in order to level up himself, he needs to be constantly beaten, which did not make Sam very happy, since the revival promised him the opportunity to take revenge, and not be beaten again. But then the system announced that tasks would appear daily to develop the owner's skills, and then one of them was voiced, according to which the owner must spend at least 3 hours a day training endurance, flexibility, strength, and hone his technique, to which Sam, pointing to his leg, replied that you can't do much training in a cast. At that moment, a noise was heard behind the door, and the handle fell down under the influence of someone's force. However, the young man's quickness was enough to instantly find himself back in bed, and the nurses who came in were discussing why Sam still hadn't woken up, where his regeneration abilities amazed everyone, since it usually takes 10 months to recover from his injuries, while everything healed for him in 6 hours. But then the young man made it clear that he was no longer passed out, and the girls, delighted that the patient had regained consciousness, immediately began asking about his well-being. Looking at his first visitors, Sam asked how he ended up here in the first place, to which one of the sisters explained that Sam's classmate Carden Jones had taken him to the hospital. Remembering the first beauty of the school, the young man also remembered how in his past life Hank constantly tried to harass the girl, but Sam did not allow this, which ultimately ended badly for him. So in this life, he, apparently, stood up for her, but he could not even imagine that she would treat him with such attention. Noticing that the young man had fallen into some kind of prostration, the nurses asked if everything was okay with him, to which Sam replied that his whole body ached, he felt dizzy and periodically felt very nauseous, to which one of the girls explained that these are the consequences of a concussion, where the young man simply needs more rest. Having told him to remain on bed rest and to call them if anything happened, the nurses left the room. Left alone, Sam was very surprised that the girls did not see a transparent screen with a timer hanging in the air, but deciding that it wasn't worth thinking about it too much, Sam collapsed in his hospital bed, deciding that it was really better for him to rest, since adapting to this new world would also require strength. Suddenly he noticed his backpack, noting the merits of Carden, who brought here not only himself, but also did not forget about his things. Sticking his hand inside, the young man found it wise to first familiarize himself with the history of this world. Having opened the textbook, the young man saw that in addition to ordinary historical events, it also described the history of the development of human energy, where it was said that the first people who learned to use energy appeared about 300 years ago. By practicing energy management, a person developed to the point that he could begin to manage his physical capabilities. Over time, the art of energy management developed into a specific system of 3 steps, each of which consisted of 3 more sub-steps. There were 3 main ways to develop internal energy, with physical exercise in first place. Second place was occupied by various artifacts, by absorbing which it was possible to increase the amount of energy. And finally, in third place were parallel and other worlds, the entrances to which were scattered throughout the world, where it was possible to increase energy by gaining experience. According to rumors, followers of the third direction have the highest strength and power, occupying key positions in this world, including in business and in government. Exhaling, Sam noted that he, apparently, had not reached even the lowest bar here, which is why he was bullied and beaten in this world. The long reading was tiring, and gradually the young man felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier, and soon he fell into a sound and healthy sleep, completely forgetting about one task that he had to complete. The young man woke up from the fact that the voice of the system reported that he had not completed his task for a 3-hour training session. Thinking that he had completely forgotten about it, the young man began to quickly get out of bed. But before he even had time to sit down completely, a portal opened right below him, which led him to even greater horror, after which the support under him disappeared, and Sam began to fall into the black depths of the open passage into another dimension. Feeling his complete helplessness, the young man could only scream. But then his flight suddenly ended, where the young man landed not very successfully on the floor of some room. Noting that it was quite painful to land, Sam looked around, trying to understand where the system had thrown him. But his thoughts were interrupted by a rustling sound that grew stronger as he approached. Turning around, the young man saw a huge monster with long tentacles right in front of him. He looked in horror as one of these tentacles, which, moreover, were also covered with spikes, soared into the air. And finally, his nerves could not stand it, and Sam shouted a question to the invisible interlocutor, asking which he wanted to understand what was going on here. Meanwhile, the hellish limb began its rapid movement towards the target, where the young man found nothing better than to try to block this blow, which turned out to be not a weak one, where additional harm, of course, was caused by the thorns. Thrown far to the side, Sam again hit painfully on the surface of the floor of the room in which he found himself to be punished for failing to complete the assigned task. Sitting down and wincing in pain, the young man asked the system why he, having already been beaten in real life, should receive beatings here too. To which the system immediately explained that this is a punishment where he must evade the attacks of the tentacles 50 times in an unlimited time, where until the task is completed he will never return to the ordinary world. Looking at the monster, and its terrible limbs, the task of dodging 50 times seemed like something out of science fiction to the young man, and one of the ominous limbs was again preparing to deliver its terrible and possibly fatal blow. Rising to his feet, Sam instructed himself not to panic, because he had already died once, which means he could definitely evade some tentacles. Having waited for the right moment, the young man loudly gave himself the order to move, and he managed to leave the line of attack of the monster's spiked limb literally just before the moment of striking. Pleased with himself, the young man noted that speed does not matter. The main thing for him is to see and anticipate the movement of his opponent. Busy with his conclusions, Sam did not notice how, on the other hand, the other limb of the monster was already almost close to his head, where, a moment later, his head took a crushing blow, once again throwing the young man several meters back, where he again hit the floor painfully. Rising to his feet and rubbing the side of the blow, Sam swore loudly, also noting that he was not prepared for this blow. But before the young man even had time to figure something out, one after another numerous blows rained down on him on different parts of his body, and then, with one of the blows, he was thrown several meters back once again, where, overcoming the pain while sitting on the floor, the young man could no longer figure out how to resist this monster. And just as he decided to gather his thoughts and rose to his feet, suddenly one of the tentacles quickly plunged into his leg, and when the monster pulled back its limb, Sam, experiencing terrible pain, fell to the floor. Immediately, blood began to ooze from his wounds, and the young man himself no longer had the strength to rise to his feet. At that same moment, the system announced that the owner was in critical condition and began the recovery process, where Sam's entire body was suddenly covered with some kind of thick white fog, which had a healing effect. Since healing occurred much faster in the punishment arena than in the real world, the system announced that in a few seconds the owner would be back in action. And now the owner of the system was already on his feet again, preparing to evade the next attack of the monster. Dodging the tentacle, Sam noted that his suffering had not been in vain. After all, now he has become accustomed to the speed of the enemy, and has studied the manner of his movements, which allows him to dodge perfectly. But suddenly the young man felt some kind of pulsating flow circulating throughout his body. He felt that this inner warmth allowed him to better control his body, concentrate, and keep his mind cool. Dodging another attack, Sam smugly said that he was nearby, and the monster could safely attack him, after which the young man confidently declared that today he would definitely defeat his opponent, and get out of the arena of punishment. For several seconds his opponent showed no signs of life at all, but suddenly all his limbs began to move at once. Sam could only watch in horror as all the tentacles his opponent possessed approached him at once, where, a second later, a hail of strong blows fell on his body, trying to shield himself from which, the young man only repeated that now he would definitely die. When the attack was over and the tentacles retreated, Sam's wounded body was left lying on the floor without signs of life, and the system, having become more active, announced the beginning of the recovery process, during which the young man noted that despite the rapid healing of the wounds, the pain from them still remained. And so, under the system's report that the progress of the task was 0, Sam rose to his feet, noting that the flow of energy continued to circulate in him. Looking at his opponent, the young man noted that since he has the ability to recover, this means he has a chance to get out of here sooner or later. Therefore, smiling at the monster, Sam said that he was ready to fight him again. And so the monster began to attack, where the young man dodged 1, 2, 3 blows, to the sound of a system keeping score. But suddenly one of the tentacles was able to touch his shoulder, where the system immediately announced that the dodge was unsuccessful and the counter was reset to 0. And while his body was being restored to its original state, the stubborn young man shouted that he wanted it again. And now he again decisively opposed his invincible and unprecedented opponent. And 3 hours later, when the system counter had already counted 23 slopes, one of the tentacles was able to strike, resetting the results. After 6 hours of fights, the young man masterfully dodged numerous attacks from the monster's limbs, and the system only managed to keep score. Turning his head to the left, Sam failed the monster's attack, and the system counted 49 dodges. And then, noticing the movement of another tentacle, the young man leaned back and to the side a little, after which it was announced that the number of evasions from attacks was 50, where at the same moment the monster was deactivated, and the system announced that the owner had completed the task and his safe return to the ordinary world. Exhausted from fatigue, Sam happily noted that he was still able to cope with this task. And now the young man was already in his room, where he again took up his studies. The nurse who came in said that it would be better for him not to study, but to rest, to which Sam replied that he had an exam soon, and therefore he needed to prepare. Then the girl said that the young man would most likely miss the exam, which prompted the latter to ask for what reason, to which the nurse explained that today Hank had already come to the hospital, wanting to get to Sam, but he was not allowed in. Then he said that he would beat him after discharge, after which the girl added that Hank connected his connections, and the young man was suspended from the exam. Of course, this was shocking news, which Sam was very dissatisfied with, which he shouted loudly. The girl added that for these reasons it is better for the young man to stay in the hospital in order to protect his life and health. Already leaving the ward, she noted that in the modern world it is very difficult to remain just a good person. Left alone, the young man began to think that his old acquaintance Hank turned out to be much meaner than he could have imagined, which, however, did not give a reason to be upset, but only stimulated the young man to become even stronger. And while the system announced that the owner was again tasked with exercising physically for 3 hours, Sam decided that exercise in the punishment arena would be much more useful. And so, instead of engaging in physical training, the young man calmly waited until the time allotted for sports was up. And finally, the deadline expired, and the system announced that the owner would now be redirected to the punishment arena. This time, a portal opened above the head of the one who had transgressed the system, pulling him inside. And once in the arena, Sam saw that this time it was not just one monster that was opposing him, but a whole bunch of some creatures. Once again, the goal was to evade enemy attacks 50 times in a row, where the young man joyfully exclaimed that he was ready to begin, after which all the monsters opposite him activated and rushed at their victim. The battle was repeated many times, where with each subsequent approach Sam dodged better and better. And finally, the system announced that the next task was successfully completed by the owner, and the young man began to feel more and more the energy flowing through his body, which was clearly becoming more abundant. And then the system issued a notification that as a reward for completing tasks, the amount of chi and experience was increased, where Sam himself noted that even this was still not enough to defeat Hank. But in any case, the task was completed, and it was necessary to first leave the arena of punishment, where in the ward it was already possible to think about what to do next. But suddenly the room seemed to begin to collapse, which the young man clearly did not expect and even screamed in surprise. A second later, the system issued a notification about the opportunity to complete a bonus task, meeting one of the stronger monsters, where the prize was an increase in chi, to which, of course, Sam immediately agreed. And as soon as the system menu disappeared, stones began to fall from the ceiling again, and the young man did not know what kind of trick to expect and where to expect it from. But his attention was attracted by the whistling sound of cutting air, and only turning his head, the young man saw something huge rushing straight towards him. A terrible blow from a huge hammer knocked Sam off his feet, throwing him to the side several meters, where, getting up and wiping his face, the young man looked at his new opponent, noting that he had never seen anything like this in his life. After all, right in front of him stood some unknown creature on 4 limbs and with a huge hammer at the end of its tail. While the young man was thinking that this task would definitely not be easy, the system announced that Sam needed to hold out against the monster for 30 minutes. And now, already dodging another attack, the young man noted that, taking into account the possibility of recovery, holding out for 30 minutes would not be a big problem. But suddenly it dawned on him that this monster was not going to wait for the moment until his opponent recovered, since the monster continued its attacks despite the injuries and recovery mode. The huge hammer, the impact of which Sam had already experienced, was again raised above his head to strike, Trying to avoid the deadly blow, the young man jumped to the side relative to the trajectory of the monster's tail, where, having fallen to the floor, the young man noted that, apparently, this monster was definitely aimed at killing him. And then the system also made it known that the owner had already received many injuries, where the recovery time had increased, and the efficiency of his movements was reduced by 10%, which certainly did not add joy. The opponent of the guilty user of the system, who was chasing bonuses, was already preparing a new attack, raising his hammer to the maximum height. The blow was of monstrous force, from which Sam tried to shield himself with his hands, while moving to the side. Although the force did not hit the young man directly, his arms were nevertheless broken in several places. The pain was hellish, and in the meantime the system stated that the owner had critical injuries, inviting him to leave the arena. Sam was ready to agree with this proposal, but at the last moment, he suddenly froze. He suddenly remembered how an ashtray flew into his head, taking his life. He remembered that humiliating blow on the football field, where he later ended up in a hospital bed. And then he decided to stay in the arena, where at that very moment the monster dealt him a severe blow. Having flown far back, the young man found himself on the edge of the arena, hitting the wall of the room. Unable to move his broken arms, Sam looked at the monster, trying to think of a way to hold out until the end. And now he noted that this arena of punishment may well become his last refuge, where no one will ever find him. But then, looking at his approaching opponent, Sam noted that the monster was not only strong, but also incredibly fast. However, he also had a weak side, where, if you analyze all his attacks, he was clearly not smart enough. And this gave a good advantage, since when dealing with a not particularly smart opponent, you can always predict all his movements. And while the young man was developing a plan of action, the monster was already nearby and looking towards where his opponent was in no hurry to descend. Without waiting for Sam to be below, the monster delivered another blow with its terrible tail, which, however, the young man dodged by jumping down. There he noted that there is enough space in the arena to dodge blows, where the main thing is not to let yourself be driven into a corner. But then, with another blow, the young man was again thrown to the edge of the arena, after which he began to gradually take more and more active actions in order to dodge the hammer, and the system only managed to count down the minutes. But then, the rapid movement of the tail still caught up with the almost exhausted young man. Once again thrown to the edge of the arena, Sam sat there in pain and came to the conclusion that he was about to lose consciousness. And the monster had already come very close, swinging in order to finish off its victim once and for all. The monster had never dealt a worse blow during the entire confrontation, and Sam could only think about how to somehow hold out. And suddenly a smile flashed across his face, because the system announced that the owner had successfully passed the test. And so, after some moments, the young man was already lying in his hospital bed, rejoicing that he was able to withstand everything that happened to him, and the system announced a reward, as well as a recovery that would take 8 hours. Continuing to study new literature for himself, Sam was suddenly delighted with the information he came across, where it was said that a training person is able to transform his chi and use its power in fights. Only now did he understand what kind of warmth was in his body, where he immediately tried to transform the energy into something material. And while he was trying out his new capabilities, the system issued a task according to which he must score 100 points of damage during the exam, which led the young man to the idea that it was time to act. Many young people were rushing to see what had just been posted on the student forum, while discussing whether this man was still alive. Meanwhile, a huge crowd had already gathered in front of the school, standing and listening to what the man on the stage was telling them. This man was Sam, who, shouting his name into a bullhorn, called for Hank O'Brien to come to him right now. Without stopping for a second, the young man continued to call his old enemy, saying that he was already tired of waiting for him here. And the students standing nearby at first could not understand at all that this was happening before their eyes. But after a few seconds the crowd was filled with discussions of what was happening, with some saying that Sam was provoking Hank, others simply calling him psychotic. But they all agreed that after his careless statements, Sam would definitely not live long. And someone even decided to try to be the first to find Hank and report the impudent man, thereby earning his respect. Listening to what was coming from the crowd, Sam noted that this was not enough and the situation needed to be escalated even more. And then he moved on to specific insults, saying that Hank was hiding like a rat in a basement, and that he flattered himself by trying to attract the attention of such a beauty as Catherine, where with his disgusting face Hank has no chance not only of this girl, but of any other. After which the young man, smiling, noted that today he was not only declaring war on his old enemy, but also wanted to make another announcement, where from today Catherine becomes his girlfriend and is under his protection, and if a dog like Hank suddenly dares to even look askance in her direction, then he will first break his limbs, then gouge out his eyes and finally deprive him of the ability to procreate. Having heard such loud statements, the crowd began to say that now this would definitely not end easily for Sam, since Hank had his eye on Catherine for a long time, where some people didn't believe that this guy on stage just decided to go against Hank himself, and others were already discussing how next year the school would announce a memorial day dedicated to the late Sam Stone. And standing nearby Cardin, one of her friends hinted that Sam, in fact, had just confessed his love to her. The girl, lowering her head, sadly mentally noted that the young man was acting recklessly, since Hank would simply destroy him. But immediately looking towards the scene where Sam continued to cover up his enemy with a variety of words, Catherine noted that this guy had saved her many times, which means now it was her turn to help him. And while the young man continued to perform, a figure suddenly appeared in one of the windows of the school building, where, as it turned out, Hank himself came to the window and visited the school principal's office. Looking down, he immediately noticed his longtime enemy Sam Stone, wondering what he was doing here on the day students registered for the exam. Turning to the director nearby, Hank asked why this guy was suddenly allowed to take the exams, to which the director replied that sometimes people, of course, behave ignorantly, but he is sure that Sam will eventually quit his studies. And the young man shouted that he couldn't imagine how he could force his enemy to expel without killing him. The director said that it took a lot of effort to first expel that young man, and then even more to reinstate him to pass the exam. However, the impudent young man asked in an arrogant voice whether the director really refused to carry out his will, to which the man timidly replied that he was in no way going to contradict Mr. O'Brien and would try to sort out this problem. Already left alone in the office, the director sighed with relief and noted that today his career could have come to an end. And then the day of the exam came, where the director explained that there were many portals to other worlds scattered throughout their world, but today an artificially created dimension was used for the exam. The portal that the students are now seeing will take them to the examination dimension, where they will need to pass tests to pass the exam. And before going to the exam, each student will receive 2 special and very important items: a sign and a signal flare. There are 3 tests in total, the first of which is competition for tablets, the second is a battle with monsters, and the third is finding a way out. In the first test, students compete for tablets with each other, where the more tablets collected, the more points each exam participant will receive. The same applies to confronting monsters, where the more of them the student defeats, the more points he receives. After passing the first 2 stages, all that remains is to find a way out of the examination dimension. The man also noted that there is no need to pretend to be heroes, and if a real threat arises, they should use a signal flare so that one of the mentors can save them. After the end of the briefing, active negotiations and discussions began among the exam participants, where some students tried to form teams to make it easier to pass the exam, where they immediately thought through the tactics of their joint actions to take possession of the maximum number of signs. Hank was also here, not without joy, noting that due to his recent behavior, which had greatly hurt the young man, no one would join him on the team. He shouted to the lonely Sam that he would be left alone, and would have only a short time to live. He explained what was happening by saying that the entire academy was under the authority of him and his family. Sam, not paying attention to the shouts of his enemy, thought that even the instructors are not able to control what is happening in another dimension. That's why they issue a signal flare. Therefore, this is an ideal place for Hank to take some unfriendly actions. And then, looking at the merry company of his enemy, Sam noted to himself that soon everyone would look at who would laugh last. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar female voice calling the young man by name. Turning around, Sam saw Catherine approaching him, who offered to become the same team with him in this exam. In response, the young man asked if she was afraid of Hank's reaction by making such an offer, to which Catherine replied that she was at least indebted to her savior. After which she cheerfully added that even though she is a girl, she nevertheless has more than enough strength. Sam, feeling emotional, noted to himself that this girl really worries about him, and does not even hide her motives for helping. And so, having accepted Catherine's offer, the young man, heading with her to the portal, said that together it would really be easier. Suddenly, one of Hank's henchmen, pointing to the young people walking together, drew his leader's attention to the fact that Catherine, apparently, had joined Sam's team. Of course, this news didn't really please Hank, who had been trying to get this girl's attention for a long time. But then the director said that the exam was starting and invited everyone to proceed to the portal, where Hank and his entire huge gang were the first to resolutely go there. Having heard the invitation to the exam, Sam also told his companion that it was time for them to move forward, to which the girl, of course, agreed. And so the young people approached the portal and took a step that was supposed to lead them to the examination dimension. And so, after a short moment, instead of the walls of the room where they had just been, a forest appeared before their eyes, where a young man, having caught a falling leaf, noted that although this dimension was created artificially, the leaf could not be distinguished from the real one. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Hank and his team, who noted that the time to admire nature had come to an end. After which he added that now Sam should think about what kind of death he would prefer to choose for himself. Standing nearby, Catherine noted that her plan to simply wander around the dimension in the company of Sam had clearly failed with Hank's quick appearance, and her companion suddenly cheerfully said that the girl had nothing to worry about, and she could fully rely on him. After which Sam went to the approaching young people, giving Catherine instructions to stay away and under no circumstances interfere. Not at all understanding what her companion was up to, the girl could only say his name, and Sam had already managed to approach Hank and his henchmen, where his enemy displeasedly noted that he was flirting with his future girlfriend. Demonstrating a kick, Sam suddenly said that his opponents still don't even know how strong he is, where all the young people standing opposite were struck by how confident this guy was in himself. Meanwhile, Sam, shouting that the only one who will die today is Hank himself, rushed towards him, preparing to strike. However, the young people standing nearby suddenly began to discuss the fact that they seemed to hear the crunching of bones, suggesting that Sam's injuries had not yet healed. The attacker himself, suddenly feeling a sharp loss of strength, was forced to stop his movement, feeling how his body was beginning to let him down, but still trying to speak loudly to his opponent. The young man noted that his chi energy suddenly began to affect the speed of his movements, preventing him from completing the attack. And the entire crowd of his opponents just stood there, silently watching what was happening to Sam. But then all the young people burst into laughter, where Hank egged on his opponent, saying that of course it was about energy, and not about the fear of being maimed. Then, looking at the bent young man, Hank said that no amount of performance would save him from what he would have a good bite of today, and so the leader of the group ordered one of his subordinates to teach Sam a lesson in strength, where the order was carried out immediately, and the young man approached the target, collecting chi energy for the attack. Sam didn't even try to defend himself from the blow, which practically knocked him off the spot where he stood, and the system announced that the resistance to this attack was 100%, 1 point of damage was awarded, where, according to the instructions, he should receive 100 points. Looking at his opponent, Sam said that he, apparently, had little practice, since his blow was not even felt. And then, showing on his face where to hit, the young man began to ask to try again, after which everyone else who accompanied Hank also became active. I wished to teach this impudent boy a lesson. Saying that Sam would definitely not live now, the young people began to surround him, which, however, did not frighten the young man at all. And then the first blow was delivered, where the attacker put his full effort into this blow, and the system immediately announced to Sam that the attack was blocked 100%. And he had already earned 2 points out of the required 100. Straightening up and smiling in response, the young man noted that his new opponent's blow was even worse than the previous one. But before he could finish speaking, he immediately received a powerful blow to the body with the edge of his foot, where the system invariably announced a 100% block and an increase of 1 point of damage, after which Sam, continuing to egg on his opponents, noted that they definitely need to learn to hit harder. Having apparently decided to test his entire arsenal of striking techniques on his opponent, the next opponent delivered an elbow strike directly to the young man's head, where again all possible damage was blocked, despite the young man staggering from the force of the blow. Turning to look at the one who was throwing the punch, Sam noted that he had the impression that he had come to a massage parlor, and was not participating in a fight, which, apparently, was the last straw of patience, since there were no more single attacks, and all the guys nearby began to randomly beat Sam. And in the midst of the action, Catherine, approaching the place where her companion was being beaten, threateningly demanded that Hank stop all this. But instead, her companion himself answered the girl, again asking her not to interfere and just observe. And while Catherine was perplexed, Sam mentally noted that there was only a little time left to wait until the task was completed. Hank, meanwhile, seeing how the girl tried to stand up for his enemy, shouted loudly for his team not to stop. And the same young man received a very strong blow, which literally knocked him off his feet, after which all the other participants in the brawl quickly rushed to finish off the enemy who had fallen to the ground. The blows rained down on Sam like a hail, and all he had time to do was note how hard it was for his opponents. Meanwhile, each blow was accompanied not only by the young man's request to hit harder, but also by the voice of the system, stating the increase in points. Catherine watched everything that happened in amazement, who noted that despite such a brutal beating, her companion looked as if nothing was happening to him at all. The leader of the group, who also did not interfere in the brawl, took out his cell phone and decided that this spectacle should be seen by as many people as possible. And so the rest of the students who were in the examination dimension began to receive messages with coordinates and an invitation to see the most interesting show. Lively discussing what could be happening there and fired up with interest, the exam participants began to move along the indicated coordinates. Someone, on the contrary, doubted that it was worth going there, since it could turn out to be a trap in order to get their signs. But explaining that Hank, who sent the message, is already capable of leaving everyone without signs, other students carried away the doubters. And so, soon a whole crowd of spectators had already gathered at the scene of the events, who were very surprised by what they saw. Surrounded by Hank's exhausted people, Sam lounged imposingly on the ground, telling his opponents that he hadn't even had time to feel anything yet. Then, sitting down and looking straight into the face of one of those who were diligently beating him, the young man asked why they had called so many spectators, perhaps to show everyone their shame. And then all the spectators began to mock the fact that Hank called them to watch how his henchman, exhausted, stood next to Sam. Of course, Hank himself was not at all happy with this state of affairs, where he did not understand what happened to his team. Without missing a beat, he gave the order to continue beating their common enemy, to which the completely exhausted fighters began to say that they no longer had any strength left, and it was useless to hit Sam, since he did not feel their blows at all. Sam himself stood and lamented that these worthless guys could not even complete the job, where he still had not scored the required number of damage points. Patting one of them on the face, he noted that the young people had only made themselves a laughing stock along with their leader, after which Sam turned directly to Hank, where he noted that since his guys turned out to be worthless, then perhaps he should have tried to attack himself. Having listened to what his enemy had just said, Hank, filled with hatred, stood aside for now. And then the entire crowd nearby burst into laughter, discussing the fact that Sam and Hank's team could not even deal with such a nonentity as Sam. Catherine did not stand aside either, who was greatly amused by how her offender, having tried to disgrace Sam, ended up disgracing himself. But suddenly Sam's longtime enemy began to move forward, where it immediately became visible how he began to collect chi energy to strike. The blow that Hank was about to deliver was one of the strongest, where Catherine shouted at Sam to retreat without facing this deadly technique. And then the attacker's hand finally reached the target, which was accompanied by a powerful sound effect. However, the result of this attack literally shocked the young man, where his opponent easily stopped this crushing blow. Grabbing Hank's hand, Sam sarcastically asked if this was all his opponent was capable of, and at that time the system announced the addition of 1 point. The spectators, who continued to watch what was happening, began to laugh again, now noting the pathetic abilities of Hank, who could not even move such a weakling as Sam, where a young man, without hiding his anger, listened to the fact that he only knows how to hide behind the status of his family, but he himself turned out to be incapable of anything. And when a stream of rage overwhelmed the young man, he, shouting several obscene words at his opponent, rushed into a new attack. Gathering chi energy into his fist, Hank directed its movement straight at his enemy. However, it was not difficult for Sam to slightly dodge this attack, which only touched him briefly so that the system would add a point to him. Continuing to provoke his opponent to further actions, The young man, smiling, asked if there would be any significant actions on the part of his opponent. Hank, thinking only that all this was simply impossible, launched a new attack. As a result, Sam's lower jaw took on a huge uppercut, which literally tore the young man off the surface of the earth while the system continued to announce the addition of points. However, having calmly landed back and without even falling, Sam, shaking himself off, again reproached his opponent for the insignificance of his skills. Katrin, who continued to watch what was happening with interest, noted that she had clearly underestimated her companion. Hank was simply lamenting out loud that his attacks, for reasons completely incomprehensible to him, had no effect. Looking at the confused old enemy, Sam said that his skills were slightly better than those of his henchmen and suggested that they continue trying. The young man's thoughts were only that he needed to accumulate a sufficient number of points in order to later get even with his offender. And at this time, saying that Sam forced him, Hank took some capsule from his pocket, which he did not hesitate to swallow. The spectators, watching this action, noted that the young man used a special pill, which exposes the body to such changes that affect a significant increase in strength and ability to transform chi energy, where excessively frequent use of such drugs has a detrimental effect on the human body over time. Meanwhile, Hank simply began to burst from the sharply increased level of chi energy, where he hissed at the enemy that he had achieved this himself. At the same moment, the system announced to the owner that due to changes in the enemy, the complexity of the task also changes, where it moves to a different category, and the required number of points increases to 150. Of course, Sam was not very happy that the difficulty of the task had increased, since before the changes he only had 20 points left to score. Concerned, Catherine shouted to her companion to be careful, as Hank was now stronger than ever. Well, Hank himself, feeling that the drug he had taken had begun to take full effect, was already rushing towards his opponent. Blocking the blow, Sam noted that the power of his opponent's attacks had increased significantly. What he felt and his back hit the tree, to which he was thrown by Hank's blow. This attack was not in vain for the young man's hands, which were severely burned in the places where force and energy were applied. The system announced that the impact resistance was 50%, and 6 points of damage were awarded. Yes, although the points did not reset to 0 during the new task, holding out until reaching 150 was not at all an easy task, and the enraged enemy was already beginning his new attack, where, judging by the movements, one could understand that the next blow would be delivered with a kick. Sam, having time to notice all the movements of his opponent, also saw how his leg was raised, where the young man managed to dodge to avoid severe damage, and the leg, carrying enormous force, applied it to the trunk of a nearby tree, breaking it in half. Telling Sam, who was on the ground, that he had nowhere to hide, Hank raised his leg high to deliver a downward slash, where the defender had no choice but to block this blow, after which the system again announced a 50% block and an increase of 9 damage points. Hank, feeling that after taking the pill something had changed in his favor, did not think of stopping, where he launched an attack consisting of a series of punches, which, however, Sam dodged. Noting that his opponent did not have enough spirit and strength to even answer him, Hank said that then he would continue the fight in the same manner, reminding Sam of all those loud words that he said on stage in front of the educational institution. The embittered fighter struck again with his hand, after which, looking at the huge hole that was left after his blow in the tree trunk, the attacker invited his opponent to surrender, where surrender means that his opponent is no longer worth resisting, which Sam did not agree to. Not at all listening to what his old enemy was saying, the young man noted that due to the fact that he had to dodge these 2 powerful attacks, points were not added. But it was better than getting hit with a single blow that would incapacitate him and prevent him from completing the task. And then, while he was thinking, Hank launched a new attack, where he struck Sam with his knee while jumping, and the system immediately announced the degree of blocking and the addition of damage points. Thrown against the tree again, the young man thought that he wouldn't last long like this, and the effect of the drug was unknown when it would end, so something had to be thought of. Looking at his opponent, who was holding on to the place where the knee had just landed, Hank once again rushed to attack, where in Sam's eyes there was suddenly a comparison between the guy rushing towards him and the monster he had to stand against for 30 minutes. Then the young man decided that here it was necessary to choose approximately the same tactics of action as then in the arena of punishment, As Sam watched his opponent prepare to attack, he told himself to focus and calm his mind. He saw Hank rushing towards him, imagining that same monster with a huge hammer at the end of his tail. Even though his opponent's speed was very high, his experienced eye still managed to catch every movement. And so the blow was delivered, where the young man made a slight movement of his body in order to dodge it. However, the slope was calculated in such a way that Sam's face caught a little without causing significant damage, where the system immediately announced an increase in points. And the spectators around began to actively and dissatisfiedly discuss the fact that Hank was clearly aiming at the temple and wanted to kill Sam. While defending himself from another attack, the young man overheard these conversations and mentally noted that it would not be so easy to kill him now. Hank's next attack threw the young man a couple of meters, wounding his hands, from which blood immediately sprayed. However, this could not make him retreat, and he continued to hold a fighting stance under the voice of the scoring system. In the new movement of his opponent, he noticed a familiar angle, where the first monster he fought with was also pointing its tentacles, after which the young man noted that this boy could never compare with that monster from the arena of punishment, since during the time spent in that arena, he learned to evade any, even the most complex attacks very well. And furious that he could not completely defeat his opponent, Hank gathered his energy and struck again, from which Sam did not dodge, but accepted it by putting out a block with his hands. The next blow followed immediately, then another, and the system only had time to announce the addition of points. Amazed spectators enthusiastically noted that Sam, by some miracle, survived all of Hank's attacks, even the most powerful ones. Everyone noted that the guy had many wounds on his body, which, however, did not seem too terrible. She was worried about the condition of her friend and Catherine, who did not understand why he did not hit back. It was assumed that after the attack, which was carried out under the influence of the pill, Sam's hands were damaged quite badly, where it was after this that the young man began to try to adapt to the way his opponent acted, where he dodged or failed blows in order to avoid serious harm or minimize it. The only thing that didn't fit into the girl's head was that all this could have been done by a person with extensive experience in martial arts, but Sam was never one of those people. Meanwhile, the restless Hank was again preparing his attack, using his chi energy to the fullest. Watching the trajectory of his opponent's hand, Sam tried to figure out how best to negate the power of the blow. And so, realizing what needed to be done, the young man quickly and forcefully pushed off from the ground, where, just a moment later, his opponent's hand caught up with him along the same trajectory. The force, of course, was enough to throw the young man several meters back into another tree, but we managed to avoid receiving significant damage. Moreover, we managed to get damage points, where, after the next points were awarded, the system announced that the task was completed, and the owner could now receive a reward. There were 3 reward options to choose from, where the first item was an increase in speed, the second item was an increase in speed, and the third was the ability to attack in response. Watching Hank prepare to attack him again, Sam chose the third option without any doubt, deciding that he would not allow himself to be beaten just like that anymore. And now the enemy approached him, delivering his next terrible blow. However, to the great surprise of the attacker himself, Sam easily stopped this movement, and the system announced that the activation of a new skill begins, where the attack energy is first absorbed. When the system announced the second stage of skill activation, Sam's entire body was filled with chi energy, where he immediately prepared to deliver his first strike. And finally, it was announced that the third stage of skill activation had also been successfully launched, after which Sam rushed to the attack. Shocked by what was happening, Hank only had time to note the similarity of his opponent's level of training with his own, after which the left side of the young man's face finally met his opponent's fist. The movement that Sam performed contained enormous strength, accumulating everything that he had experienced up to that moment. Thrown far to the side, Hank fell to the ground, his condition no longer allowing him to continue the fight. Immediately, the defeated fighter was surrounded on all sides by spectators who had been watching the events all this time. None of them could believe that Sam had such enormous power, with which he defeated Hank himself. Catherine, who also stood there and tried to wrap her head around everything that had just happened, was no less shocked than the others. Meanwhile, the winner of this confrontation approached the defeated enemy and offered to continue the fight, where while he was saying this, the system announced that the owner had now mastered a new skill in striking back. However, at that moment, his henchmen arrived to their defeated boss, who began to lift him from the ground, not believing in his defeat even after he took the pill. The loser himself could not believe his defeat, trying to understand how this could even happen. Watching the team drag their weakened leader, the audience never ceased to be surprised that such a celebrity as Hank turned out to be weaker than Sam. And the winner of the fight noted that with the help of the new skill, earning points will become much easier. Quickly finding himself ahead of the losing side trying to leave the battlefield, Sam suggested not stopping there and continuing the fight, where he goaded those who dragged Hank, stating that their leader is now like a beaten dog, for whom they probably really want to avenge. Of course, these words greatly hurt the pride of the young people, who, however, did not know what to say in response. The winner himself noted that the circumstances were now in the best possible way, where most likely the guys would now attack him again and add points of damage to him. However, shouting that they would still have time to take revenge on him, the entire team suddenly turned around and ran away. Watching his opponents flee, Sam cursed, since this state of affairs did not promise him any new points. Then Catherine turned to him, who had already managed to approach Sam, where she reminded the young man that they needed signs from the losing side. Remembering that they were now in the exam in the first place, Sam rushed to catch up with the defeated, demanding to give him the tablets. And the young people, trying to hide from the reprisal, looked around and tried to urge each other on, seeing that Sam was catching up with them. Gradually, they began to come to the conclusion that they would not be able to hide, since the exhausted Hank was greatly slowing down their movement. And suddenly one of them, stopping abruptly, shouted that he had had enough of this running around, where he loudly shouted that even if he, Paul Handriggs, had to sacrifice his life, he would protect their leader, and therefore remain to detain Sam, where the others, having heard this, were very surprised at when their comrade managed to become so selfless. But then the whole company, which continued to move, suddenly stopped, where two more, calling themselves Frank Castle and John McCoy, also said that they were ready to die the death of the brave for their leader. The last person Hank could rely on also began to say that he was also ready to sacrifice himself. But others, the first to speak out about their victim, immediately stopped him, saying that then there would be no one to drag and protect Hank. Throwing the leader onto his back, the young man noted that now at least there was no need to rush. Meanwhile, Sam was rapidly approaching his recent opponents, where Catherine was not far behind him. And then suddenly 3 henchmen of the defeated Hank appeared in front of him, shouting loudly that now Sam was definitely finished. Noting the high devotion of the henchmen to their leader, the young man prepared for battle. But suddenly something happened that neither he himself nor anyone else, including Catherine, who was nearby, could have expected, where his opponents suddenly fell to their knees in front of them, raising their hands in a military salute, which was a sign of respect and submission. After which, begging Sam not to hit them, they took out their signs and handed them to the winner. Having accepted the offering, still not understanding what was happening, Sam asked in confusion that this was the way they wanted to stop him. The girl standing next to her noted that they most likely shouted loudly about Sam's death on purpose so that their leader would not think anything bad against them, but they themselves, afraid of the beating, surrendered, which the surrendered trio immediately confirmed, saying that they deliberately called out their names loudly, since their future in friendship with Hank would definitely be secured, and they would somehow survive this defeat. Having received an explanation, the young man smiled, understanding everything that this team had done with their boss, where there really was no loyalty. And then, clutching the treasured tablets, the young man noted that now he could move forward, because the exam continued. 2 already quite exhausted students, being in the middle of the forest, were preparing to repel another attack. And then from somewhere out of the bushes a strong stream of energy burst out and rushed past them, after which the young people decided that it was better for them to leave this place. But before they had time to take even a few steps, 2 more students pounced on them from the bushes. Using forceful techniques, they quickly immobilized their opponents, where the latter did not expect such an outcome of the exam. And at the same moment, a stream of energy appeared again from the other side, rushing straight towards the prisoners, where this time, being immobilized, the young people were unable to evade, and the attack was successful, after which the guys went limp, and the one who carried out this attack appeared from the thickets, noting that this was an excellent technique that Hank taught him. One of the prisoners demanded that they be released, To which the newly appeared member of the gang replied that in this case their master Hank O'Brien would not be able to get the most plaques and pass the exam better than anyone else. After which the one who had only immobilized his fellow student began to demand that he give the sign, to which the prisoner replied that then his days in the educational institution would be numbered. But in response, he only received a kick to the head and heard a statement regarding the fact that he does not know how to set priorities correctly. After which the young man who struck the blow explained that by giving away the sign, the guy would only lose his extraordinary future, while his master would lose first place. And so, demanding to give up the sign, the young people began to actively beat their captives. Experiencing dozens of blows, the young people could only think about how severe this humiliation was for them. From his complete powerlessness, one of the prisoners loudly began to call someone for help, where, a second later, someone's voice practically ordered to stop this beating, where, raising their heads, the victims saw Sam in front of them, accompanied by Catherine, and the young man continued, saying that random people he met could beat him up, but they didn't dare touch others. Hearing such an unusual and rather bold statement, the sign thieves literally froze in place. Recognizing the impudent man as Sam Stone, the young people noted that he was apparently very lucky that their leader did not kill him. And the captives concluded that the hope of salvation was false, since a person like Sam could not do anything against their offenders. And the young man happily noted that he was very lucky, since, apparently, not everyone had learned that he had knocked out Hank. And now the trio was already rushing towards their new goal, declaring along the way that if he managed to escape from their master, then they would now finish what he started. Watching the approaching young people, Catherine asked her companion if he needed her help, to which the young man replied that the girl could just watch, after which he fearlessly took a step forward directly towards his next opponents. The first blows by the attackers were delivered simultaneously from 3 different sides. After some time, the young people noticed that their limbs were already hurting from the number of blows they had received, but their opponent was still quite alert, and their former captives declared with no less surprise that this Sam was not at all the same Sam who was familiar to them before. The very object of the application of physical force, to whom the system had only announced the addition of points all this time, suggested to his opponents not to stop trying, where the latter once again noted that they had already reached the limit of their capabilities. But the opponent's unchanged state made them very angry. However, after weighing all the pros and cons, the young people found only one reasonable solution, which was to leave the battlefield as soon as possible. However, Catherine immediately rushed after the guys trying to hide, shouting after them that they would not be able to escape. After a few steps, the girl performed a good jump, instantly blocking the path of 2 fleeing young men. They tried to break through further, but they were unable to do so, since their path was blocked by a powerful kick inflicted by Catherine, the power of which the young people were unable to withstand and literally fell to the ground like sacks of potatoes. But immediately jumping up, the 2 guys themselves detained their accomplice, saying that they alone did not want to receive money for their joint actions. Continuing his attempts to avoid punishment, the third began to beat his own people, demanding to let him go and give him the opportunity to escape. Where, busy trying to free himself from the grip, he didn't notice Sam appearing behind him, which struck with such force that the young man literally plowed his face into the ground, and at the same moment, his former captives settled with him for the beating. After some time, the entire rumpled trio sat by a tree with their hands tied behind their backs, and not far from them, Sam and Catherine and the 2 guys they saved were also sitting by the fire. The rescued only had time to thank their saviors for what they did, noting that it was unknown how it could all end for them. Sam replied that there was nothing to thank him for, mentally noting that thanks to these 3 hooligans he was able to earn a lot of points. Handing the sign to his faithful assistant, Sam thanked the girl, saying that he couldn't have done it without her. Accepting this generous gift, which guaranteed passing the first stage of the exam, Catherine, like him earlier, replied that no gratitude was required, and the young man was already extending his hand with signs to the rescued, inviting them to take something that would definitely allow them to move on. However, the guys began to refuse this help, saying that they did not help in getting these trophies, the total number of which could greatly help Sam in the end. But the winner did not want to hear anything, saying that he already had 4 signs. Having accepted the gift, the young people did not skimp on words of gratitude, also declaring that if Sam ever needed anything, he could count on them. and he really needed information regarding who was acting in Hank's interests and how, where he received information that some were extracting tablets for him. Other people on his team are focused solely on fighting monsters. All of this was confirmed by the guys saved by Sam, saying that the young man had already defeated the strongest of Hank's team. After listening to his interlocutors, Sam suddenly announced that this time he wants to make sure that both Hank and his entire team lose. In response, the guys shouted that this was impossible, since each of Hank's team was stronger than the average student. However, Sam stated that he was ready to take any blows from their opponents and deal with all the consequences. Here Katrin intervened in the dialogue, saying that he alone might not be able to cope with so many opponents, to which the young man explained that both Hank and his people were simply very arrogant, which is why he had to take the pill just to try not to fall in the eyes of others. Where, even after the exam, if Hank tries to take revenge, it will only be on the one who humiliated him, that is, Sam. Then the young man turned to the guys' emotions, asking if they themselves were still tired of regularly acting as punching bags, where he said that at first they will allow themselves to be outdone in the exam, but then they will get used to these concessions and in all their future life activities they will be no better than slaves. Concluding his speech, Sam, rising to his feet, said loudly that if he were to change something in his life, there would definitely not be a better moment than now. There was deathly silence all around for a while, where Sam, thinking that his words had no effect, sank into his seat. But both recent prisoners shouted loudly that they really had enough of enduring all this and should start resisting. And Katrin, approaching her companion, noted that he had excellent speaking skills. In response, Sam, of course, thanked the girl, but noted to himself that he was just sharing his own life experience from a past life. And at this moment one of his new allies was already interested in where they should begin their actions, to which his savior replied that first he needed to photograph their new captives, after which the photos should be sent to all your friends, calling for the location of other members of Hank's team to be revealed. Sam also asked to mention that he was the initiator of everything and was ready to distribute all the signs he received, where he, Sam Stone, is ready to help absolutely everyone who needs help. Katrin noted that her companion acts very decisively, and in general does not behave like an ordinary student, and so the leader of everyone who had been under the yoke of Hank's team for a long time said loudly that the time had come to put their plan into action, after which the entire company of young people got up and left the place of their short stay. A girl with bare shoulders was convulsively pressed against a tree, where, almost screaming, she asked to be left alone. But the two guys approaching her did not even think of stopping, demanding a sign and the female attention of a beauty whom they had not even noticed before for some reason. Having closed her eyes, the girl began to scream with all her might and call for help. And then Sam, who appeared behind the unscrupulous students, loudly told them to stop their actions. He managed to attract the attention of Hank's team members, who were quite surprised by such bold behavior of their once quiet classmate. Meanwhile, their planned victim had already risen to her feet, taking a couple of stones in her hands, where her face did not bode well for the attackers. Hank's henchmen didn't even have time to understand what had happened when they suddenly experienced a sharp pain in the back of their heads. Well, the defenseless girl, suddenly pulling her hair and unbuttoning her jacket, suddenly began to turn into a boy, where, looking at the defeated opponents, the young man, holding a wig in his hand, noted that two more had been disposed of. Meanwhile, Sam contacted his girlfriend, asking how they were doing with neutralizing Hank's henchmen, to which Katrin immediately replied that they had just dealt with another trio of lovers of easy prey, after which she added that they were now taking the signs and moving on, to which Sam reminded her friend not to forget to deliver the prisoners to the designated place. Concluding the conversation, the young man noted that his new allies had exceeded all his expectations, having caught so many people from Hank's team, to which his partner, finishing tying up one of the neutralized hooligans, noted that he was very happy with the decision to stand up for himself. Of course, they would never win in a one-on-one confrontation, so they attack in groups. And then Sam's partner asked him for what purpose he was collecting all the prisoners in one place, to which the young man replied that this was necessary in order to deal with everyone at once, where such determination impressed his partner quite strongly. And so, soon everyone who had been neutralized by the United Students was in one place next to those who had brought them here. Talking among themselves, the captives speculated about what their captors might want from them, where there were even suggestions that they were simply going to be subjected to group reprisals. But suddenly, seeing the opening portals, the prisoners realized that this was the very place where the monsters were supposed to appear to pass the second stage of the exam. And the latter did not keep themselves waiting at all, starting to emerge from the portals, which horrified all the captive members of Hank's team, who decided that in this way those who caught them decided to get rid of them once and for all. At that very moment, all these previously cool guys began to call their mother and beg to save them from such a terrible death. Sam, who had been watching what was happening all this time, finally voiced the command to join the battle, and everyone who had recently been hunting Hank's henchmen rushed to attack the monsters, where everyone, attacking monsters, used their abilities at the highest possible level. The director observing the exam saw the bound members of Hank O'Brien's team calling for help while among the monsters, where, taking advantage of this situation, the male department ordered to immediately move forward to rescue the students and suspend the exam. Of course, these monsters were artificial and could not cause physical injuries, but the psyche of the students could suffer, which the director voiced, hurrying the mentors moving inside the portal. And when the rescue mission was inside, the director sat down on the floor, thinking that he, too, would get a good deal for everything that happened. And so, after some time, all the students were gathered in the assembly hall, where the results of the exam were to be summed up. The director announced that the test was successful and now the best student will be publicly awarded, where the entire crowd immediately burst into applause, congratulating Sam and wishing him good luck. And so, the young man who appeared on stage thanked everyone for such an attitude and support, where he did not forget to note that it was thanks to all of them that he, who specifically took fewer signs and killed fewer monsters, was able to take first place. Meanwhile, Hank's defeated team stood on the sidelines along with their leader, who was clearly not happy with this outcome. The director had already managed to present the best student with his well-deserved award, where the prizes were a potion that increases chi energy, a martial arts textbook, and a special card. This card, which is issued only to one, the best student, gives him a special status. This award created a real sensation among students, who noted that this time the prizes were much better than in previous years. She was especially happy for her friend and companion in the exam, Catherine, who still could not believe Sam's abilities, which brought him to first place. At this time, one of Hank's fighters turned to his leader, saying that this award was clearly intended for him, which only added fuel to the fire, where Hank, the loser in everything, was already beside himself with rage. And Sam, seeing that the award ceremony was over, deftly jumped off the stage. Approaching his old enemy, the young man, showing the prize, noted that he had heard a rumor that this award was intended for Hank, to which his opponent loudly asked what else Sam needed, who already got everything he could. And the students watching all this action noted that Sam probably wants to continue the fight, so he's running into it. And so it was, because the young man, having demonstrated the potion, asked his enemy if this was really something that would help increase his chi energy. After which, right in front of the enemy, enraged by the helplessness, Sam crushed the package, from which the pill immediately flew out, which the young man deftly caught and immediately swallowed. At that same moment, the young man felt as if his body was filled with all the energy of the world, where he immediately noted that his chi energy now moves in a completely different way, opening up new possibilities for its use. Katrin, who was watching what was happening, noted that when Hank took pills, he always chose those that caused the greatest harm to the body. Taking his old enemy by the head, Sam noted that the pill he had just taken was very similar to the one his opponent had used during the fight. Therefore, he will share it with Hank, who is so accustomed to these drugs, if he ever gets hold of something like this again. After which the young man turned around and walked away, laughingly declaring that even though they were opponents, they needed to help the helpless. Hank, who had long been at the limit of emotions, shouted that he and Sam were completely different people, of different status and position in society. The weekend came and all the students who arrived to study from the outskirts of the city, or even from other cities headed to their homes. Sam, sitting by the window of the bus, looking at the city landscapes passing before his eyes, noted that although this is a different world, in general, everything here is the same as it was in his old world. This world for Sam was the same old and peaceful, everything as before. The bus stopped, and the guy got off near a house he knew. He thought that since the weekend had arrived, it was time to return to his home. Sam stood in front of the door and did not dare to enter. He had not seen his parents for a long time. In his past life, his parents fell ill with an unknown disease, and every day they became worse and worse. Sam got into huge debts, but still couldn't cure them, and so as not to bother him anymore, they took pills and died. The guy didn't know if everything was okay with his parents in this life, but still he decided to go in and check. He swore that even if they were sick, he would make every effort to help them. But suddenly the door itself opened in front of the guy. His father appeared in front of Sam, who was very happy to see his son. The guy could not hold back his tears when he saw his father. Sam jumped onto his shoulders and hugged his loved one very tightly, whom he had missed for so long. Father didn't understand why these tears were coming because they hadn't seen each other for only a week. He asked Sam to come quickly because Mom had already prepared a lot of things. They came to the kitchen and after a while began to have dinner with the whole family as before. The mother took a piece of meat and put it on her son's plate, telling him to eat more meat. She noticed that the guy had lost a lot of weight. Apparently he didn't take care of himself at all and was skimping on food. Sam analyzed the situation. It seemed to him that everything was fine in this world with his parents, but the blood and she had weakened, so he could be wrong. The guy ordered the system to open the exchange window, and instantly a system window appeared in front of him. Various types of medicines were written in the window, but most of all he was interested in blood and chi supplements. He asked the system if this was a medicine, and she replied that the supplement was introduced into the body to improve physical condition. The guy decided that he needed to save up points to buy medicine for his parents. After all, he doesn't have that much pocket money, but it's better to take this supplement now. After the purchase, his fingers glowed bloody red. He pointed his index fingers at his parents, and an unknown additive shot at them. The parents, having dinner peacefully, felt that something strange had happened and were surprised. The father did not understand why he felt so good and nothing hurt anymore. The mother confirmed and said that she also felt strange. The guy said it was probably because they saw their son and immediately felt better. The father patted Sam on the head and said that the guy would spend the whole tomorrow with him in any case and didn't even think about sneaking away. But Sam was not a lazy guy, and his parents needed help. In this life, parents make a living by selling vegetables at the local market. The father sat on the ground with his son and invited people to buy his fresh vegetables. Sam decided that in this situation it would be prudent to sit here, even though selling vegetables was a little difficult with his abilities. Before he could finish his thought, someone stepped on his father's carrot and crushed it. These were two men who looked like rich bandits. One was wearing gold rings and had a cigarette in his mouth, and the second looked like a more intelligent person. The one with a cigarette in his mouth asked Sam's father if his business was going well. The man, without thinking twice, collected a large bag of carrots for the man. The father smiled when he recognized the fat man and handed him a bag of carrots, saying that he was very glad to see Mr. Wang and thanked him for providing the place. Wang laughed and kindly accepted the offering, telling the old man not to forget to pay the next month's rent. He also leaned over to the second guy, who turned out to be his son, and told him to work hard, otherwise, after graduation, he would also become a salesman. The guy, whose name was Kevin, replied that he had good grades and therefore this would never happen. The fat bandit laughed and said that it sounded promising. Sam was not happy with such impudence, and in a rude tone he ordered the two men to stop. Van turned around and asked who this guy was and what he needed. But Sam was serious. He told the man that he must first pay for the spoiled vegetables. Van was amused by such a statement. He felt funny that some boy was trying to force him, the head of the market that gives them all places to trade, to pay. The bandit said that he was the parent here, as well as food and clothes for Sam's father. But before he could leave, the guy's fist, charged with chi energy, flew towards him. A powerful blow immediately flew into the face of the arrogant businessman. The force of the blow was so powerful that he immediately fell to the ground along with Sam. The guy bent over the bandit and demanded to pay for the vegetables again. Suddenly his father approached him and asked the guy to calm down because they couldn't cope with him. Sam said that he would sort everything out, but then someone grabbed him by the collar with a hand overflowing with blue energy. It was Van's son who demanded that the legs be removed from his father, especially since Sam is studying the arts. Then he has no right to use them against ordinary people. The guy's words amused Sam. He decided to provoke him and offered to fight. Kevin was angry at such impudence because Sam is one of the worst students at the academy, and he is at an average level and is no match for him. Deciding that he would definitely be able to fight such garbage, Kevin swung at the hero. His hand was filled with energy, and in a split second he delivered a powerful blow to the opponent's face. However, Sam didn't seem to feel anything, and a system window appeared above the guy's head, which reported that his damage resistance was 100%, and he received 1 hit point. Kevin stood in bewilderment. He was sure that he had definitely hit his enemy, but for some reason he did not receive any damage. Sam gloatingly asked the guy if he would beat him, and he himself thought that it would take too many points to buy medicine for his parents, so he could use it to replenish his balance. Kevin's rage began to boil. Not only was he unable to stand up for his father, but he was also humiliated. Therefore the guy, without thinking twice, decided to try to attack his opponent again. This time the blow was even more powerful, but Sam still stood motionless like a statue. Sam continued to taunt Kevin by saying that he liked the feeling of being bitten by a mosquito, like a massage. More and more blows came to Sam, thanks to which he was able to accumulate enough impact force. He looked at his burning fist and said that even an ordinary mosquito eventually gets boring. After that, he hit Kevin with all his might, which knocked out several of his teeth. The force of the blow was stunning, and the guy traveled a long distance before landing. But this was not enough for Sam. He approached the enemy lying on the ground and began to finish him off with his feet, saying that his dad was deceiving people, knowing that they would not be able to resist them. He wanted Kevin to try to hit him again, because he is in the middle of the rankings, so why is he waiting and not attacking? Kevin, at that moment, tried to defend himself from powerful blows by lying on the ground, realizing that his opponent was terribly strong. Suddenly Van appeared behind Sam, who ordered him to stop, otherwise he would close his father's shop. The father took the entrepreneur by the hand and tried to resolve the conflict by saying that his son did not understand that he was creating problems for them because he behaved this way. The appearance of the old man angered Van, and he hit him in the face, saying that he didn't care whether he died or lived, the main thing was that he made his young man stop. At that moment, Sam saw what happened and already turned around to teach the bandit a lesson. With a powerful blow, he hit Van in the face and said that no one dare touch his father. The arrogant bandit could not stand on his feet and began to fall. Holding his face, he shouted that it was too late for an apology, and now their shop was closed, and they could get out of here. But it wasn't enough for Sam. He leaned over to the man and asked him to repeat what he said. He then reached into his pocket and took out the badge, showing it to Van, who then asked him what it was. The impudent man's eyes suddenly became big. He was surprised to see this sign. He couldn't believe that the director had given this guy a card. And this only meant one thing: Sam was a special student. As a rule, such a card is given to only one student who is able to pass the test, and only the best students with good skills and grades will be able to receive it. Wang realized that this guy was not as simple as he seemed, although it was obvious that he was from a family of ordinary merchants. Perhaps he met important people and was able to establish a relationship with the director. The man began to take out one of the cigarettes, and thought that in any case there was still a chance to fix everything. Suddenly he smiled sweetly and handed the cigarette to Sam, offering it to him, and saying that he didn't want to stumble again. The guy refused, answering that apparently the man's eyesight was failing him, because he was a student and he couldn't smoke. Then Van approached the guy's father, gave him a cigarette, and said that apparently there had been a mistake and apologized. Sam's father lit a cigarette, and invited the head of the market to talk face to face. Mr. Wang immediately offered his protection to the old man's shop, saying that he would crush anyone who dared to touch their counter into powder. He changed his face to a kind and decent one, and added that he meant that he would make every effort for the well-being of Sam's family. A little later, our heroes returned to the house from work and went to bed. Sam's parents, even in their sleep, felt the pain of the oncoming illness. Suddenly the door to their room quietly opened, and their son entered. The guy acquired the ability again, and used it on his parents. The sleeping parents never woke up, but immediately felt relief. Sam returned to his room and sat on the bed. He understood that he needed 2 medications at once to help both parents. This would be enough to strengthen their health. He took his badge from the cabinet, which reminded him that it was time to think about preparing for the entrance exams. Despite the fact that the card will add points to him, it is not a fact that the place will be given to him. he needs to become stronger to achieve a result. He looked at his badge and tried to think of some way to quickly gain points. The guy called up his system panel, on which it was written that he had a level C task to survive a week in a dungeon, the reward for which would be blood and chi. Sam immediately remembered the dungeon in which he took the exam last time, but it was virtual, while the real dungeon is much more dangerous, because each dungeon is a separate world, each with a different ecology. Even ordinary adaptation to such conditions requires considerable effort. The guy also thought that in addition to the complex ecology, monsters are also different everywhere. There are humanoid monsters that look like aliens. There is a race similar to animals, such as two-headed cobras with huge horns. There are also the cutest elves who only seem harmless in appearance. And also don't forget about the legendary monsters, which are the most dangerous. But unlike the virtual world, in a real dungeon there is a chance of death. But you only need to hold out for a week. With your current abilities, you just need to be in the range of low-level monsters all the time. As long as Sam does not provoke powerful monsters, he will be able to earn points. It was a good plan, but first we needed to find a dungeon nearby. Opening his phone, he found one. It is very close, only 20 minutes away. Sam decided to go there tomorrow, but for now he could rest peacefully. The guy was lying on the bed and soon he fell asleep. Suddenly, in his sleep, he felt some nasty liquid dripping into his eye. Sensing danger, the guy immediately woke up. He looked up and saw the monster's huge teeth hanging over him. A huge monster tried to attack him, and it seemed that Sam was falling in weightlessness. The hero firmly decided that he was not dreaming, but he could not understand where the monster came from in his house. The guy was running across an incomprehensible field filled with monsters, and a huge red pentagram was spinning above him. Seeing this apocalypse, Sam did not understand how this could even happen. He decided to ask his system what was happening at the moment. But the system issued only one message, that the security of the world had disappeared and everything was destroyed. Then the window began to suck in, disappearing in front of the guy, the system no longer responding. Sam was in shock. He did not believe that the keeper of the world was missing and asked the system to explain what this meant. However, at that moment the strange pentagram began to sparkle and someone appeared from it. More and more monsters entered this world, and now the hellhounds have entered here. The monsters ran after Sam in a crowd, and he tried to run away from them faster and faster. But one monster was still able to catch up with the guy and opened his mouth wide to eat him. At that same second, Sam woke up in a panic. The guy got out of his bed and realized that it was just a dream. But for some reason the dream was too realistic, and what kind of protection of the world was the system talking about? It turns out that the world is under the protection of a large system. And if this is so, then it is not clear who the organizer is and where they are all located. And what needs to be resisted, and why keep the monsters if they are in the dungeon? The questions became more and more. Sam read a lot of history books, but nowhere was this mentioned. This could be because it never happened, or more likely because someone deliberately cleaned it up. In the end, a book is just a tool with which the author shows the reality that he wants others to see. But this does not mean that they write the truth. In Sam's past life, one of the books said that there is a country where dishes are washed about 10 times. And in another country the air is always sweet and candies fall from the sky. And one elementary school student walked about 10 miles in a day. But in fact, these are all fictions and this has never happened. But as a child he believed in them. Sam assumed that he was having these dreams because he was a time traveler. But what the meaning of them was unclear. In the end, he gave up. The guy didn't want to understand anything. He decided that at this stage he wouldn't even think about it. So he just lay down on the bed and tried to sleep. But at the same moment the guy jumped out of bed because he couldn't stop thinking about it. Sam looked at his phone, which showed 11:00 p.m. The guy decided that he still had time. He got ready and went outside. The hero decided to stop messing around and go into the dungeon and inspect everything. After some time, the guy came to a mysterious portal, near which there was a large queue of people. There was a guard next to the portal who asked everyone to stand in line to go further. Sam was surprised that in the evening there were so many people wanting to go to the dungeon. His turn came, and our hero approached the entrance to the monster's hideout. But suddenly the guard put his hand on his shoulder and asked him to stop. He began to scold him for coming here because students should study, and not die in dungeons. But Sam told the guard that there were no age restrictions for entering the dungeon. He replied that the guy was right, but he had not yet reached the martial arts realm, so if he entered, he would immediately meet his death. Sam wondered what the minimum requirements for this dungeon were. Was it possible that even the lowest race of monsters were in the martial arts realm? The hero thought that in this case he needed to develop a plan, so he turned around and just decided to go to bed. However, at that moment, his system reported that the mission had expired, so he would go to the punishment dungeons. This angered the hero because he completely forgot about his task. He also realized that everyone would see how he was moving into the punishment dungeon, so he needed to quickly escape from a crowded place. There was less and less time left, and the hero ran faster and faster. Sam told his system to wait a little and was angry that it did not understand the situation the guy was in at all. The hero headed into the forest, and the people standing in line were surprised, saying that he was moving towards death. However, this did not stop Sam. He needed to get out of human sight as quickly as possible. A portal opened behind the guy's back and began to pull him inside. Sam continued to be angry that this stupid system didn't understand the situation and didn't care. Fortunately, only he can see the portal here, otherwise he would have been caught long ago and used as a lab rat. At that same second, a huge monster appeared in front of the guy, which was 10 times larger than him. A system window appeared in front of Sam, which said that his new task was to defeat the void monster. Now he was not a weakling who would be beaten just like that, and was ready for battle. The monster did not stand idle for long, and began its attack. However, our hero also did not stand aside and hit the monster in the leg. He then tried to jump onto the monster's knee and get to its face, but the monster stopped the guy by hitting him with his huge fist. Sam put a block and managed to defend himself from the blow, but he fell off the monster's leg and landed on the floor. The guy said that it was a good blow, but, unfortunately, until the monster kills him with one blow, he will never defeat Sam. After this, the hero used his reflection ability. Instantly, a blow of reverse force flew into the monster, causing it to immediately fall. Sam gathered all his chi power and landed on the monster's face. Then he hit it with all his might, causing the monster's nose to bleed. But the monster did not give up. He tried to grab the insolent creature and squeeze it with his own hands. Sam resisted the compression and shouted that the monster could not defeat him. He then used reflection and attacked with his head. The huge monster fell to the ground again. This time he was defeated and began to dissolve in space. A system message appeared in front of the hero saying that the punishment task had been completed and now he would return to the ordinary world. It was already morning in the world, but people were still crowding in front of the portal to the dungeon. Sam returned. The guy realized that the entrance and exit were in the same place, which was good, because thanks to this, no one saw him and the guy was very lucky. Suddenly someone called his name and asked what he was doing here. It was Katrin, who was wondering what the hero forgot in the forest when he had to go to school. Sam panicked and asked if she had seen anything strange. The sweet girl did not understand what strange thing she was supposed to see here. Sam made it a joke by saying that now that he thought about it, it wasn't weird anymore. Therefore, since nothing happened here, it's time to go to school. Catherine looked at the running guy with surprise. Sam ran and thought that the dungeon is only open to those whose level is above the martial arts realm. But then what was Katrin doing here? She should know about it. In any case, it doesn't matter as long as no one knows about the punishment system. The guy realized that he shouldn't rely only on the punishment arena because he won't quickly raise his level. He needs to find another way to earn points. The faster he accumulated enough points, the faster he could buy a blood chi pill and be able to reach the level of the martial arts realm. But he didn't know how to earn it, and then an interesting detail caught his eye. It was a laptop with an open student forum tab on which it was written that the rich man Hank confessed to Catherine and was again mercilessly rejected. Sam laughed because he had practically forgotten about his point-earning tool, which was right at his fingertips. Meanwhile, evil Hank walked along the sports field with his friends. The guys he passed whispered and said that they wanted to write the word tragic on his leg. The guys laughed behind their backs while discussing the show that turned out during the exam. Hank turned around in a rage and told the guys to repeat it all to his face and not talk about it behind his back. But this didn't scare them. They all now considered Hank just a talker who couldn't do anything. Hank still froze in one position, but no one listened to him and all the guys simply dispersed. The guy didn't understand what happened and why they were reacting to him like that. He asked his partners what they knew about it. Hank's friends bowed their heads as if they didn't want to tell him. Finally, One of them handed the phone to the guy and said that he had better take a look at it himself. Hank picked up the phone and immediately became furious. They wrote on the student forum that the dog Hank, for all his vile deeds, tasted Sam's fist of justice. The guy immediately realized that these were Sam's tricks because no one else would have had the courage to do something like that. He immediately imagined Sam sitting at the computer and laughing. From such thoughts, Hank immediately broke his phone. The guy who gave him his phone number began to cry, and Hank decided to settle everything right now, even though he wanted to do it in a few days. He took out his phone and began dialing someone's number. Hank called his uncle and said that he needed some wandering warrior because he wanted someone to die soon. The bully promised that he would pay for this any amount of money they asked. Hank's friend couldn't believe his ears. The fact is that wandering warriors are the type of fighters who have become stronger due to independent training or unusual phenomena. Due to the lack of documents, they cannot find work and differ from ordinary soldiers in that nothing limits them as long as they are paid well and will do whatever is necessary. The bully's friend said that Sam is still a student, and if Hank hires someone from the outside, the school won't leave it like that. Hank replied that the only reason they cared was because it would tarnish the school's name. But if Sam was outside the school, no one would care if his body was found somewhere in the woods. But since he will have to pay off most of his fortune, killing Sam will not satisfy him. Therefore, Hank should have killed Catherine as well. Sometime later, in the evening, Sam stood near the country arena. The guy noticed that an abandoned building is a great place to kill without making too much noise. He looked at his phone, where it was written that if he wants Catherine to be safe, then let him come to an abandoned building outside the city. Sam felt responsible for getting the girl into this, so he decided to save her. Entering the building, Sam called Hank the dog and asked him to come out and not hide. At the same second he heard the sound of multiple steps. A crowd of bandits appeared in front of the hero. Behind Sam stood Hank along with all his friends. The bully said that he wanted to deal with the guy later, but since he couldn't wait, he would do it today. Sam looked at the guys and realized that, judging by their clothes, they were roaming warriors. He could not even think that Hank would go this far. But the level of roaming warriors is usually low, since they are not properly trained on how to level up further, and with Sam's protection they do not pose a threat to him. But the most problematic of them is this guy. Sam's instincts tell him that he is very strong and perhaps a step stronger than Sam. The guy decided to act cunningly. He asked the most dangerous one who he was because he didn't remember him among Hank's servants. The warrior replied that he was not a servant at all, but simply took on an easy job. That's all that was required of him. Hank pays him, so he has to work for it accordingly. The leader butted into their conversation asking if Sam was really scared, because just recently he had been so arrogant. The hero smiled and said that if he wants him to be arrogant, then it's easy to arrange. The battle was about to begin. Everyone was ready to attack. The servants began to laugh at the guy, saying that he was too brave for a student. It was time to kick him in the ass so that he would not become arrogant. The strongest wandering warrior began to accumulate his chi energy in his fists, and said that he had already seen people like Sam in the dungeons. There are only two options. The first is that such guys are simple fools, and the second is that they are wise men who show off. Noticing his opponent's strength, Sam assumed that since he could compress his blood to such a level, then the guy must have already reached the realm of martial arts. The fighter shouted for the others to block all the exits and prevent him from escaping. The first blow of the wandering fighter was aimed at Sam's chest, but he managed to dodge. However, suddenly blood began to flow from the guy's body. The system reported that damage was blocked by 20%, and hit points increased by 17 units. At that moment, Sam realized it wasn't going to be easy. After all, the fighter's level was higher than his, and because of this, only half of the damage was blocked. And worst of all of his attacks are aimed at killing. Sam would be killed if he wasn't careful. Something had to be done quickly. The guy looked at his main enemy, in front of whom stood a very strong fighter. Hank laughed at the guy. He asked what happened to him because he had always taken blows well, but now he couldn't. At that moment, Sam ran sharply towards Hank. He stood right in front of his face and asked why he didn't find out for himself. The bully panicked and began shouting to his servants to protect him. The strongest wandering warrior stood up for the employer and blocked Sam's path. But the guy was not so simple, and unexpectedly for them he pushed off the wall and ran away in a different direction. The warrior thought that the guy was trying to escape and rushed in pursuit. Running along the corridor, Sam suddenly notices another fighter, but weaker than the one who was chasing him. The fighter said that the guy would have to go through him first if he wanted to escape. However, Sam takes the most unpredictable step. He spits in the face of a weak fighter. Then he simply runs past the stunned guy. This was not what the fighter expected. He was shocked when he saw the saliva on his face. Fury immediately boiled in the guy and he, wiping his saliva, shouted that he would kill Sam. And the guy was still running along the corridors, and another of Hank's servants blocked his path. The guy covered his face with his hand and asked Sam what he was trying to do to him. Only children spit when they fight. But Sam makes another illegal move. He kicks his opponent's balls. The guy rushed forward, and the unfortunate fighter threatened that he would personally kill Sam. Hank noticed that all Sam does is hit below the belt, although these blows will not harm them, but the humiliation will be huge. Another fighter suffered from the brazen spitting of a guy. He spat at everyone he saw, and anyone he couldn't spit on he hit between the legs. As a result, all of Hank's servants were furiously chasing Sam. Everyone wanted to get even for this humiliation, and he simply turned around and showed his middle finger to the fighters, saying that if they want to stop him, then let them try to catch him first. It seemed that nothing would stop Sam and he would go away unpunished. But suddenly he was stopped by someone's foot, which entered the guy's face. One of the fighters powerfully slammed Sam into the wall with his blow. The guy landed and stayed on his feet, and the system reported that another hit point had been received. A crowd of angry fighters were ready to tear Sam apart for what he had done, and he continued to mock, answering that all this talk about his murder would not benefit them all, and it would be better for them to discuss it over a cup of tea. The fighters' patience ran out, and one of them shouted for Sam to talk to his ass better. At the same second, many blows from the fighters flew at the guy. The system began to report a lot of hit points received due to the fact that the guy was being kicked by a whole crowd. Sam shouted not to be hit in the face and asked to stop because they would kill him. One of the fighters laughed, thinking that the hero was afraid, but if he had not spat, he would not have gotten hit in the face right now. Another fighter shouted that the guy's life ended when he hit him between the legs. Hank liked the show. He ordered the guy to finish him off as quickly as possible and beat him to such an extent that his own mother would not recognize him. But in fact, it was Sam's plan. He lay there and thought that everything had turned out the way he had originally planned. Sam suspected that if he provoked everyone, then that martial arts realm level fighter would not beat him up with everyone else. While he doesn't act and just watches, everyone else is just a tool for earning points. He himself has allowed them to drive him into a corner. Meanwhile, the most dangerous fighter stood and simply watched the beating. After 20 minutes, the guys got tired of beating Sam and suggested they rest a little. Hank thought a little and remembered one scene that happened to him earlier. It was exactly like this. However, the strong fighter was at a loss. He did not understand how this was even possible. Not to mention the wounds on the guy. There was not a single bruise after 20 minutes of beatings. Something was clearly wrong here. Meanwhile, Sam was thinking that he had accumulated a good amount of points. But he would like to be beaten for a couple more minutes, and he would have enough points to get a large amount of chi blood and ascend to the martial arts realm. However, the guy's thoughts were abruptly interrupted. That same strongest fighter decided to deal with the guy himself, and check what was wrong with him. He concentrated his energy into his fist, and slammed it right into the center of Sam's chest. From such a hellish force of the blow, Sam crashed into the wall with a roar, which immediately began to crack. The thug stood in front of the guy who had made such a dent in the wall that he couldn't fall. Blood began to flow from Sam's mouth. The system informed the guy that the damage was blocked by 50%, and he received 36 hit points. The fighter knocked the guy to the ground and began to beat him. He shouted that he didn't understand what tricks the guy was using, but for some reason the other fighters were only tickling him. Therefore, he decides to personally end it himself. His friends were satisfied with this situation. Hank didn't care who killed Sam, but the other hooligans had not yet rested, so they left everything to the boss. This was not part of Sam's plans. His level of points was still not enough to get into the martial arts realm. However, the boss did not wait. He immediately ran towards the guy. His face was fierce and his fist was filled with powerful blood chi energy. The boss hit the guy, and Sam tried to dodge the powerful attack. But the strong fighter moved too fast, which made it more and more difficult for the guy to dodge. Suddenly a notification window appeared that said that the guy received 11 hit points for a small scratch. The beating began. Only Sam now received not 1 point for hits, but 19, 22, 31 points. He could hardly defend himself against the boss's powerful attacks. He had to come up with something. After all, he understood that at this rate he would die faster than he could accumulate points to unlock the martial arts kingdom. The guy realized that he needed to miraculously avoid the next attack, but he had too little time to dodge. Therefore, he quickly opened the system window and began to click something in it. Meanwhile, the boss swung and used his Blood Fury strike. This blow was so powerful that it broke the wall behind Sam and scattered stones around the guys. After the dust from the debris cleared, the boss saw Sam lying near the wall. Hank mocked him and said that the guy got this for messing with him. Today he will be a dead dog. However, it was not over yet because Sam continued to press something in the system. The boss stood up and couldn't believe his eyes. The guy was alive after his fierce attack. He also saw the guy clicking somewhere and typing something. The boss asked in horror what the guy was doing. Meanwhile, Sam lay and smiled among the piles of rubble. He was buying spirituality. If he had not done this, he would have died right now. Then the guy began to buy chi blood repeatedly and his physical indicators such as attack, evasion, and defense began to increase. The boss started to panic. He didn't understand what Sam was doing. But right now he was becoming more dangerous by the second. Therefore, he decided to finish him off right here and now. Otherwise it would be too late. He jumped at the guy. But suddenly he jumped sharply from the place where he was lying. The furious warrior tried to attack Sam. But now he could deftly dodge it. After he dodged, Sam attacked his opponent with a kick. Now the not-so-powerful fighter flew a decent distance away, but was still able to stay on his feet. He didn't understand how this could even happen, because a couple of seconds ago the guy was powerless. But now he easily dodges him. Hank didn't like this situation. He told the guy to stop playing with him and finally finished him off. Hank paid a lot of money for it. The boss again used his powerful aura because he also wanted to quickly finish off Sam. His fist glowed red and looked like a true flame. He used the same move that knocked Sam back earlier, a blood rage strike. However, now the guy had nothing to do with it, and the system only reported that Sam had blocked the damage he received. Our hero was waiting for this moment, the moment when he could use his ability. The time has come to repel the enemy's most powerful attack. Sam punched the boss right in the face. Due to the enormous force of the impact, the man rolled across the ground and hit his head against the wall, making a dent in it. He still couldn't believe that this was possible. Apparently this guy is a real monster. After these last words, the spirit of the most powerful wandering warrior left his body. The weaker fighters couldn't believe that their boss had lost. It seemed like they were sleeping and this couldn't really be happening. Hank was stunned that such a powerful fighter was defeated just like that. All the servants who were guarding Hank no longer wanted to fight. They understood that it was better to get away from this guy. Hank was overcome with fear. He looked at the guy and asked what he was going to do. He pointed at Sam and shouted that his family was not one to mess with. But the guy didn't care about that. He only said that thanks to the hooligans who beat him, he became so strong and therefore they all need to somehow repay him for this. Otherwise, he won't be able to sleep peacefully tonight. After these words he hit Hank. After such a blow, Hank fell, and Sam mocked that the once great and formidable enemy now could not even withstand one blow. All Sam could rely on was his defensive ability, and now he could defeat even a fighter from the martial arts realm. After the case was completed, Sam began to run away from this place, leaving Hank lying unconscious. The guy had a feeling that he had forgotten something very important, but apparently this was not so important. Now the most important thing for Sam was testing his power level at school. After some time, the guy got to school and they began to examine him. The girl taking the measurements received the tests and looked at the final data. When she saw them, she couldn't believe her eyes. Sam was still a student, but his level of strength and defense was the same as that of martial arts realm fighters. The girl has never seen this before. The guy's abilities are almost reaching the maximum possible. He is very close to ascension. The guy hurried to take the sheet with the results and thanked the girl for her work, saying that he knew that he was very strong. Now Sam could finally get into the dungeon he wasn't allowed into, but he still thought he forgot something. Suddenly the guy stopped abruptly, and it seemed that he understood everything. He forgot to free Katrina from Hank's trap. Some time later, Sam walked through the schoolyard and thought about what happened. He was faced with a truly difficult problem because the guy should be the hero who saves the beauty. But he forgot about the beauty. Now the guy has only two options. The first, he goes back and saves her, although the girl was alone for too long on a cold night and perhaps she is already dead. And the second option, he needs to call an ambulance to ask if they can come and pick up the body. But the problem is that he needs to find a solution in the event that Hank sets him up by saying that it was Sam who killed the girl. Sam decides that he would rather suffer from a short pain of law enforcement than from a long one. The guy even decided to call the funeral home just in case. In any case, you can pretend that you accidentally found a corpse. Suddenly, Katrin appeared next to the guy and asked what corpse he was talking about. The beauty that appeared stunned Sam. Having not yet come to his senses, he asked the girl if she was alive and if she felt the cold in her body. Katrin replied that she was, of course, alive and did not understand what the guy meant. Sam came to his senses and said that everything was fine, but now he urgently needed to leave. The guy turned around and walked away from the puzzled girl. But Katrin didn't want to just let him go and asked him to stop. Suddenly she asked if Sam liked her. The guy was shocked when he heard these words. He didn't know what to answer her. The girl became embarrassed and said that Sam saved her because he liked her. In addition, the guy had been helping her lately and even fought with a fighter from the martial arts kingdom. She found out about this battle. But the guy didn't need to save her. She just didn't want to create problems for him, and so she pretended that she was kidnapped in order to avoid him. In truth, Katrin hid her identity, and she is not from the lower strata. Her family would never agree to their relationship. Sam panicked and asked the girl to stop, but the girl continued by saying that no matter how much the guy loves her, they can't be together. Katrin can't prove it, but they really aren't right for each other, and she doesn't want her family to beat the guy up. The guy pretended that he didn't understand anything and said that he never said that he loved her. The girl was surprised by what the guy said because he went into an abandoned building in order to save her. Sam said that he only went to this place because Hank pisses him off, and if there was any other girl in her place, he would have done the same thing. He went there to finish all this mess he made, and he also completely forgot about the girl, which means that he doesn't love her. The girl was disappointed by these words. She thought that the guy ran away to heal his wounds, but it turns out he simply forgot about her. Sam smiled awkwardly and said that he was embarrassed to say this, but it was true. But Katrin was still a good person. But the girl no longer listened to him. There were only two phrases in her head, that he does not love her, and that she is just a good person. Turning around, the guy said that he was a bad person because he used her to take revenge on Hank. But since he saved her, now they are even. The girl lowered her head and quietly asked if Sam really didn't like her, if it was all just in her head. He again confirmed her words and said that if it weren't for Hank, they wouldn't even be talking. And now he needs to go to the dungeon, and the girl needs to go rest. The girl began to get angry and asked again if he really didn't love her even just a little bit. The guy said that he doesn't love her even a little bit, and now he has other things to do, and needs to leave. Finally, Katrin said that she always refused guys, but none of them ever refused her like Sam did. But suddenly she calmed down, realizing that she was behaving like a child. Sam helped her, which means that she still needs to repay him somehow. She called someone and said that she had a friend who was going into the dungeon, but he had not yet reached the level of skill for anyone to be on a team with him, so they should help him. Meanwhile, Sam arrived at the entrance to the dungeon. The strict guards still said that if people want to enter, they must stand in a line. As he passed by people, he noticed Sam and told him that only people who had reached the martial arts realm could enter, and he did not belong here. He ordered the boy to return to school and go to his class right now. Suddenly Sam took out a certificate and showed it to the guard, saying that he had permission from the teacher which said that he was no lower in strength than a fighter in the martial arts kingdom. The security guard couldn't believe his eyes. The guy was still a student, but according to his characteristics, he was already like a martial arts fighter. The man immediately assumed that Sam was using some illegal substances. Sam got angry. He said that the teacher could not give him any substances and he is so strong simply because he is talented. Finally, he said that if he had never seen geniuses, now is the time to take a closer look. Meanwhile, various members of the expedition in the dungeon were looking for ranged and melee fighters to join their team. Sam approached them and asked if they were looking for a fighter for the team. If so, then he could join them. But the guys didn't want to take him, saying that he had better go back to school if he still hadn't reached the level of the martial arts realm. Sam took out his recommendation and said that he had not reached this level, but his characteristics were just like those fighters. The guys said that the hero has impressive characteristics, but they are looking for a real fighter from the martial arts realm, not a fake one. Sam couldn't believe that no one wanted to join him on the same team. He tried to join other groups of participants showing his recommendation, but everyone continued to refuse him, saying that the guy should go back to school and this was not a place for children. Others said that they didn't need someone on the team who could only bring water, so let them get out of here. He even approached some tramps who looked like not very smart guys to join them. The leader, hearing the guy's proposal, picked up his soap and dropped it on the ground. He said that if Sam raised him, they would make an exception for him. Of course, he did not expect such humiliation and refused. As a result, the genius, who has various skills, was unable to find a suitable team. Sam thought that he could go alone, but then immediately discarded these thoughts because he had never been in a dungeon, and it was better to find a large team so as not to die. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by someone's footsteps. Sam raised his head to see who approached him. It was a team of fighters who invited the guy to join their squad. The man said that the guy looks good because he has a nose, 2 eyes, a mouth, and that's enough to join them. Sam showed the man his testimonial and asked what he thought of it. The guy showed that he has strength and endurance, and he definitely won't be an anchor for the team. The man said that he didn't need any papers because he saw a genius at first sight. In fact, he believed that the guy was deceiving, and if not for Lady Katrina's order, then no one would need him. Meanwhile, Sam couldn't believe that everything turned out so easily. Apparently this man was up to something. You need to be ready. Compared to all of them, Sam had no status, looks or money, so it is unclear what this man saw in him then. The man told the guy not to be shy and join their squad. His name is Brian, and he is the captain of the team who will protect him. Sam thought that whatever it was, he had a team now. The guard escorted the squads away, saying that if they wanted to get inside, then they should hurry up and not interfere with the other squad getting in. The new squad that Sam was in said that they were ready to move out. One of the squad members, a grim, hooded man, bumped Sam with his shoulder as he passed him. The hooded man turned to the guy and growled quietly. Then he suddenly bowed his head and apologized to Sam. The hero felt that this guy was so gloomy that his gaze gave him goosebumps, but for some reason he seemed very familiar to him. Brian turned to Sam and said that he had better keep up if he didn't want to get lost here. Sam asked the leader about this guy. He said that he goes alone. Does this happen? Brian replied that those who go alone can take all the loot for themselves, and this means that they are either very strong or very greedy. The guy thought about these words and then said that now he understands. After a while, our heroes walked to the entrance, where the danger zone begins. Brian said that although the level of this cave is not high, all the monsters here are real, so it's better for them not to spread out if they don't want to die. Therefore, they need to get to know each other better and cooperate to kill more monsters and earn more money. The girl answered the leader that they had known each other for quite a long time, and there was nothing to tell them. Apparently Brian wanted the newcomer to learn more about his new team. The girl leaned over to Sam and said that this older sister's name was Sarah, and she specialized in long-range attacks. And she also wondered what trick a child like Sam had used to get here. The hero replied that he knew too few people to get here, to which Sarah replied that in this case, the older sister likes to interrogate rich and young guys. But a bald man intervened in their conversation, who asked Sarah to move away and not pollute clean children with this vulgarity. He introduced himself as Toby and his specialty is melee attacks, and this strange guy's name is Ryan and he specializes in killing swords. After the squad introduced themselves, our heroes set off. Suddenly the leader stopped them, saying that there was something wrong with the road ahead. A squad was running away right in front of them, being chased by different types of monsters. Frightened people ran away and shouted that the path was full of monsters and they could not stop them. Sam noticed one interesting detail. The aliens here are similar to those in the punishment dungeon. Brian became covered in chi energy and, holding his sword, said that apparently it was time for a big battle. He took his great sword out of its sheath and shouted at the monsters to attack. One of the aliens, who looked like an orc, jumped straight at the leader of the squad. Ryan and Toby immediately rushed to Brian's aid. Sarah also did not stand aside and began to create a magical sphere. Brian was able to cut his opponent in half with ease, and Toby's blows were so strong that they pierced the aliens right through. However, the beaten alien raised his huge hand and it seemed that Toby was about to come to an end.